Have you ever felt a kind of exhaustion that doesn't go away even after 8 hours of sleep? A tiredness that lives deep inside you, somewhere even your body can't reach. Waking up already drained, carrying a quiet guilt for resting, and feeling useless just for existing. This isn't your personal weakness. It's a symptom of a society that has turned freedom into self-exploitation and life into an endless race that no one is winning. In this video, we're going to walk through the shadows of what Byung-Chul Han called the Burnout Society. We'll explore why you feel this way, why so many people are silently falling apart, and most importantly, how to turn this exhaustion into awareness. If you stay with us until the end, you'll start to see your suffering differently, and maybe for the first time, breathe without guilt. If that resonates with you, stay. This video was made for those who no longer know how to keep going. We live in a time where everything seems possible. Starting a business, traveling the world, switching careers, being free. But the price of this so-called freedom is paid quietly, through anxiety, self-pressure, and a constant guilt for not doing more. Freedom has become a performance, and failure, an unforgivable sin. Do you ever feel like you should be doing more, even when you're already at your limit? That's no coincidence. It's the symptom of something much bigger and much more cruel. Byung-Chul Han warns us that we're no longer oppressed by authoritarian bosses or repressive regimes. Today, we're exploited by ourselves. We've become both the boss and the employee of a system that demands productivity 24/7. Self-exploitation is more effective than external domination because now we work willingly and with a smile. But that smile hides a breakdown that many feel yet few can name. What Han calls the achievement subject is this person who feels guilty for not reaching everything the world promises. It's the hyperactive self that is never satisfied, that sees rest as weakness. This person is always tired but doesn't know why. And more than that, feels guilty for being tired. Have you ever felt like that? Like you're lazy, useless, not enough, even when you're giving everything you've got? In the past, we lived in a disciplinary society where commands came from the outside. Now we live in a performance society where the pressure comes from within. That's more dangerous because it's invisible. When the enemy lives inside you, how do you fight back? How can you rest when you are the one denying yourself that right? This is where modern suffering begins, in the impossibility of stopping without feeling like a failure. Most people make the same mistake. They think they're tired because they lack discipline, when in reality they're exhausted from having too much of it. You are not the problem. The system that convinced us we only matter when we're producing, that's what needs to be questioned, not your body, which is quietly crying out for help. Have you heard that cry, or have you learned to ignore it too? This is the first key, understanding that your suffering is not a personal weakness, but a collective symptom of manipulated freedom. And if you start looking at your exhaustion differently, it might stop being a burden and become a compass, a direction toward what truly matters. But what happens when this constant pressure meets silence? That's what we're going to explore next. We live in an era where being busy has become a badge of honor. If you're constantly doing something, you're seen as valuable. But if you pause, you're lazy, useless, disposable. Productivity has turned into a moral value, and rest, a modern sin. But this endless chase for efficiency isn't making us better, it's breaking us. Have you noticed how guilt follows you even when you try to relax? Positivity has become an obligation. Phrases like "be grateful," "think positive," "you got this" flood our feeds, but they cover up a deeper issue, the denial of suffering. We're no longer allowed to say we're sad. We can't show vulnerability without being seen as weak. Toxic positivity is a prison with invisible walls, and the worst part, it isolates us because it makes us believe we're alone in our exhaustion. Byung-Chul Han says we live in a society of transparency, where everything must be shared, performed, and communicated. Even pain has to be presentable. But there's one thing this society can't handle: silence. Because silence is subversive. It breaks the performance cycle, and that's exactly why it has become so rare and so necessary. Today, we're uncomfortable with silence. We turn on the TV, open our phones, play a podcast. We can't stand being alone with our own thoughts anymore. But it's in silence that the soul whispers what productivity drowns out. What if the answer you've been looking for is waiting right there, in the quiet? How many times have you run from silence, afraid of what you might find? Most people do this without realizing it. They fill every second with noise to avoid facing their own inner abyss. But only those who face that abyss discover what lies beneath the exhaustion, the longing to live more truthfully. Silence is not emptiness. It's the space where the soul relearns how to breathe. Do you still remember what it's like to breathe without rushing? What if the silence you avoid is the very thing that could set you free? What if the peace you're searching for isn't in doing more, but in doing less with more presence? In the next chapter, we're going to talk about a phenomenon you might know all too well: burnout. But not as an individual issue, as a collective cry of our time. Burnout is more than a clinical diagnosis. It's the emotional collapse of an entire generation. It's not just work-related stress. It's the inner breakdown of someone who tried to handle everything for far too long without ever stopping. It's the body saying, "I can't take this anymore," while the mind still insists on pushing forward. Have you ever reached that point, where even breathing felt painful? The Performance Society turns each of us into our own executioner. And when we fall short of expectations, the feeling of failure kicks in, even if no one else is pressuring us. The pressure is internal now. The whip is in our own hands. That's the cruelest part of burnout. It comes from the effort to be perfect, to be productive, useful, exemplary all the time. The hustle culture, work till you drop, never give up, always push further, has taught us that a person's worth lies in their ability to produce. But this dehumanizes us. It turns us into machines. And when those machines break down, they're thrown away. No one teaches us how to stop. We're taught to push through, even if it costs us our mental health, our bodies, our souls. Most people make this mistake. They confuse exhaustion with personal failure. They think they're weak, unmotivated, or not good enough. But the truth is, you're burning out because you've been trying too hard for too long. You're not failing. You're being crushed by a system that demands the impossible. And the most tragic part, if you stop, the world keeps going, as if nothing happened. Byung-Chul Han describes this as the self-aggression of the Performance Society. Unlike the repressive systems of the past that imposed limits, now we are the ones driving ourselves into exhaustion, and no one sees it because we're still smiling on social media, pretending everything's fine. But inside, an entire generation is screaming without a voice. Do you recognize that scream? What if burnout is actually a sign, a message from your body, your soul, your life, telling you to stop fighting yourself? In the next chapter, we'll talk about a kind of tiredness that doesn't destroy, but heals. A kind of fatigue that might actually be a doorway to a different way of living. Have you ever heard of that? Not all exhaustion destroys. There's a rare kind, deep, almost sacred, that doesn't break us, but reconnects us. Byung-Chul Han speaks of a contemplative tiredness, one that doesn't come from overproduction, but from slowing down. It's a kind of fatigue that arises when we take off the armor of performance and simply exist. Have you ever felt that pause? that moment when time seems to stop and everything quietly makes sense, even just for a few seconds. This kind of tiredness is different. It doesn't come from doing too much, but from looking inward, from facing your own emptiness without trying to fill it with tasks, goals, or likes. In ancient philosophy, especially among the Greeks and Stoics, leisure, skole, was seen as a noble state, essential to wisdom. But today it's been hijacked by guilt. Rest has become something to be ashamed of. Stopping feels almost like a crime. What if we're all unwell because we've forgotten how to stop? The Italian philosopher Franco Bifo Berardi once said, "Too much stimulation is killing sensitivity. And when we lose our sensitivity, we lose our ability to truly feel life, to see beauty in what doesn't generate profit, to hear the sound of the wind, the stillness of a quiet room, the heartbeat of our own existence." When was the last time you felt something without doing anything? Most people ignore this kind of tiredness. They believe exhaustion only comes from doing, but there's also the exhaustion of feeling. And that one is fertile. It's where the deepest thoughts arise, the most painful truths emerge, and the most real forms of freedom begin. When you allow yourself to feel this kind of tiredness without judging it, something shifts. The pain doesn't disappear, but it becomes bearable, even revealing. This is the kind of fatigue that sets you free, that makes space for you to reconnect with everything you lost in trying to be everything, all the time. It's not passivity, it's resistance. It's saying, I exist beyond what I produce. And maybe that's the first step to healing not just your body, but your soul. Can you give yourself that space? Or are you still waiting for someone else to give you permission to stop? If this kind of tiredness is real, how do we live it in the middle of chaos? In the next chapter, we'll explore real, practical ways to resist without disconnecting. Small actions, conscious choices, and a new kind of courage. The courage to just be in silence. Resistance doesn't have to be loud or heroic. Sometimes the bravest form of resistance is simply getting out of bed, taking a deep breath, turning off your phone, saying no to a meeting, a task, an expectation. We live in an era where rest has become an act of rebellion, and in a world that demands constant productivity, slowing down is a form of protest. Do you have the courage to slow down? Byung-Chul Han isn't proposing an escape, but a shift in awareness. He invites us to see the invisible, the subtle mechanisms that are making us sick. When you start saying no to what drains you, you're saying yes to what heals you. And it doesn't have to be a drastic change. It can start with minutes, a quiet cup of tea, a walk with no purpose, a more attentive look inward. Simone Weil once said, "Pure attention is a form of prayer." Being fully present, even in boredom, is an act of resistance. We're not used to that because we were trained to stay distracted. But healing lives in attention, and when you really pay attention to yourself, you start to notice the signals from your body, your mind, your soul, asking you to pause. Most people try to survive by ignoring those signals, but the more you ignore them, the louder they get. Until a crisis hits, a breakdown, a breaking point. But what if you didn't have to reach that point to change? What if you could start now with small acts of quiet rebellion? Turning off notifications, going to bed earlier, sitting in silence, being whole. You don't need to change the world. For now, you just need to change the pace, to find your rhythm within everyone else's. It's not easy, but it's possible. And when you do, you don't just survive, you start to truly exist. Life stops being just about effort and becomes about presence. But no matter how much we try, there's still one feeling that weighs heavily: loneliness. In the next chapter, we'll dive into that deep, quiet emotion that follows us, even in the middle of a crowd. Because maybe what you feel is the same thing so many others are silently hiding. Have you ever felt alone, even while surrounded by people? Smiled for a photo while everything inside you was falling apart? That's the reality for an entire generation. Hyper-connected, yet emotionally isolated. Loneliness today isn't about lacking company, it's about lacking real connection. And deep down, we all feel it. But few have the courage to admit it. Byung-Chul Han shows us that this loneliness is a product of the performance-driven mindset. When everyone feels the need to look strong, there's no room to show weakness. So we stay silent, we pretend, we perform wellness while our souls sink. But the truth is there's a shared exhaustion, a collective ache, and no, you're not actually alone. The pain you feel is more common than you think. This collective silence has a name, helplessness, but it also holds hidden strength. Because when an entire generation starts realizing it's burning out, it can begin to change. Small movements are already happening. People reclaiming the right to rest, to feel, to say, "I'm not okay." That's not weakness. That's a new kind of courage. The courage to be real. Most people try to fix this pain alone. They think it's just in their head, that they'll get over it. But pain loses power when it's shared. When you speak up, someone hears you and relates. And when you listen, you realize you're not the only one. There is strength in knowing your pain is not a flaw. It's a language, a call for something new. Maybe you don't need all the answers right now. Maybe what you really need is a place where you can simply exist. No pressure, no performance, no guilt. This video, this channel, this community, this is that place. Here your pain is welcome and your silence is safe. Here you don't have to pretend to be strong. You can just breathe. But now that you've recognized this exhaustion as a symptom of the system, what do you do with that awareness? That's what we'll talk about in the conclusion. And you'll see why this could be the beginning of your transformation. The Burnout Society, as described by Byung-Chul Han, doesn't shout or command. It whispers in the voice of self-demand, in the inner pressure that never stops, in the constant guilt of never being enough. But once you see it, once you recognize the system that's making you sick, something shifts. You begin to forgive yourself. And that forgiveness is the first step toward freedom. Your exhaustion is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of clarity. It means your soul is still resisting even after everything. So please, don't blame yourself for being tired. Hold yourself with compassion and know that here you are understood. Here you are seen, and more importantly, you are not alone. Now drop a comment below. What kind of tiredness are you feeling today? Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to feel understood. If this video helped you breathe a little easier, share it. Send it to someone who needs it too. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because every week we'll be back to remind you there is life, even in the pause.